Boy delivers an old book to his grandfather, and inside is something that transforms his life. Walter Johnson was spending his retirement days in the tranquility of his home in Columbus, Ohio, tending to his garden and receiving visits from his grandson Ethan every afternoon. At 72 years old, the widower had found a refuge from the loneliness he had felt since losing his wife Margaret 2 years prior in his simple routine. It was on an ordinary afternoon that Ethan came running through the front door, carrying in his hands a thick, dusty book he could barely hold properly. "Grandpa, look what I found at Mrs. Wilson's house," shouted the 10-year-old boy, his eyes shining with curiosity. "She said I could have it before they tear everything down." Walter lifted his glasses, which were resting on his chest, and observed the object in his grandson's hands. It was an old book, with a leather cover worn by time and yellowed pages that gave off that characteristic smell of old paper. "What book is this, Ethan?" he asked, reaching out his hands to take it. "I don't know, Grandpa. It was up in the old house's attic, with a bunch of other dusty stuff. The lady said it belonged to someone who lived there a long time ago." The boy handed the book to his grandfather, who felt a strange chill upon touching it. There was something familiar about the object, as if he had seen it before, but he couldn't remember where or when. "Let's see what's inside here," said Walter, carefully opening the first page. The book appeared to be a collection of classic poems, with pages stained by dampness and some handwritten notes in the margins. Ethan moved closer to his grandfather, curious to discover the contents of this found treasure. Walter was gently turning the pages when suddenly something slipped out from inside the book and fell to the floor. Ethan was quicker and bent down to pick up the object. "Grandpa, it's a photo," he exclaimed, examining the old black and white image. When Walter saw the photograph in his grandson's hands, his face instantly turned pale. His hands began to tremble, and he tried to hide it. But Ethan had already noticed the strange reaction. In the photo, a young man appeared, hugging a pretty woman and a small child. The man in the image had unmistakable features that Ethan recognized immediately. "Grandpa, this man in the photo is you," said the boy, comparing the young face in the photograph with his grandfather. "But who is this woman and this child?" Walter felt his heart race. He reached out a trembling hand to take the photo, but Ethan continued examining the image with detective-like attention. "I don't know those people," lied Walter, trying to sound casual, but his voice came out strained. "But Grandpa, you're in the photo with them. Look here, there's even a date on the back, 1978. Ethan turned the photograph over and read aloud the date written in faded blue pen. Walter did a quick calculation in his head and realized that date was 5 years before he met his late wife. "Ethan, give me that photo. It must be some mix-up," he said, trying to take the picture from his grandson's hands. "But Grandpa..." "Ethan!" Walter's firm voice made the boy stop questioning. "Give me the photo, and don't bring this up again." His grandfather's serious tone frightened Ethan. He had never seen his grandpa speak to him that way. Reluctantly, he handed over the photograph and watched as Walter quickly put both the photo and the book into a drawer of the dresser. "Grandpa, why are you mad?" asked Ethan, his eyes welling up. Walter realized he had overreacted and bent down to his grandson's level. "I'm sorry, my boy. Grandpa isn't mad at you. It's just that this photo must be very old and it's not important at all," he said, forcing a smile. "How about we go eat some of those cookies Grandma Margaret used to make?" But Ethan wasn't so easily distracted. His childhood curiosity had been awakened, and he couldn't stop thinking about that mysterious photograph. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It's a great help for those of us just starting out. Now back to the story. That night, after Jennifer arrived to pick up Ethan, Walter couldn't sleep a wink. He tossed and turned in bed, thinking about the photograph he had hidden in the drawer. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get that image out of his mind. At 3 in the morning, he got up and went to the dresser. With his hands still trembling, he took the photo and examined it under the lamplight. The young man in the picture was indeed him, there was no doubt. And the woman beside him was Margaret Wilson, his first love, the one he never managed to forget completely. But what troubled him most was the child in the photo, a boy of about 3, with brown hair and big eyes, smiling innocently at the camera. "My God," murmured Walter, feeling the tears well up. Michael. The name left his lips like a whisper filled with pain and regret. Michael was his son, the result of his relationship with Margaret Wilson, an intense passion from his youth that ended when he was forced to choose between love and family pressure. Walter remembered those difficult days of 1978 when his traditional family found out about Margaret and the boy. His father, a respected businessman in town, had given him an ultimatum. Either he abandoned that fling and married a girl from a good family, or he would be disinherited and thrown out of the house. At just 25 years old, and without the financial means to support a family, Walter had made the most cowardly decision of his life. He abandoned Margaret and Michael to marry Catherine, an arranged union that lasted 40 years until his wife's death. Now holding that photo, all the painful memories came flooding back with full force. Margaret pregnant, begging him not to leave her. Michael taking his first steps, calling daddy to a man who had decided to deny his own fatherhood. The next day, Ethan arrived at his grandfather's house as usual, but found Walter acting differently. The elderly man was nervous, avoiding his grandson's eyes and giving short answers to his questions. "Grandpa, can I see that book again?" asked Ethan, his curiosity still alive. "What book?" pretended Walter. "The one I found yesterday with the photo." "Oh, that one. I put it away in a safe place. It's not something for a child to be fiddling with." Ethan realized his grandfather was hiding something important. The strange reaction from yesterday and the change in behavior today were clear signs that there was a mystery surrounding that photograph. "Grandpa, who was that woman in the photo, really?" "Ethan, I already told you I don't know that person," replied Walter, but his trembling voice betrayed the lie. "But Grandpa, you were hugging her, and there was a child, too." "That's enough, Ethan," Walter exploded, slamming his hand on the table. "I said not to bring this up again." The boy was startled by his grandfather's violent reaction. He had never seen Grandpa Walter so upset. His eyes filled with tears and he ran out to the backyard, hurt and confused. Walter realized he had lost control again. He looked out the window and saw Ethan sitting under the maple tree, his head hanging low. Remorse filled his heart, but he didn't know how to explain the situation without revealing a past he had tried to forget for decades. When Jennifer arrived to pick up Ethan that afternoon, she noticed that both her father and her son were strangely quiet. "Did something happen here?" she asked, observing her son's sad expression. "No, dear. Everything's fine," lied Walter. "Dad, Ethan is so quiet. Did you two have a fight?" "It was just a misunderstanding, nothing serious." Jennifer knew her father well and could tell when he was hiding something. At 45, she had inherited her mother's perceptiveness and could read Walter like an open book. "Ethan, what happened?" she asked her son on their way home. "Mom, Grandpa is lying to me," said the boy, still hurt. "He knows the people in the picture, but he said he doesn't." "What picture?" Ethan told his mother about the book they found and the mysterious photograph. He described his grandfather's strange reaction and how he had quickly hidden everything away. Jennifer was intrigued by her son's story. She knew her father well and knew he wasn't one to lie, especially not to Ethan, with whom he had a very close relationship. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, she called her father. "Dad, Ethan told me about a photo you two found today. He said you got upset." On the other end of the line, Walter sighed heavily. "Jennifer, it's nothing important. Just an old photo that must have been forgotten inside the book." "Dad, why don't you tell him the truth?" Ethan was very hurt. "The truth is, there's nothing to tell. It was just a misunderstanding." Jennifer knew her father was lying, but she decided not to push it over the phone. The next day, she would go to his house to clear things up. Meanwhile, Walter spent another sleepless night, tormented by the memories the photograph had stirred. He got up several times to look at the image, each time accompanied by a mix of longing and guilt. He remembered the last time he saw Margaret, when she came to his house begging him to take responsibility for their son. He had been cruel, denying paternity and throwing her off his property. "Walter, you know Michael is your son," Margaret had said, tears in her eyes. "Look at him and tell me you don't see yourself in him." But Walter had chosen to close his eyes to the truth and turn his back on his own family. Social pressure and the fear of losing his father's financial support had spoken louder than love. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his grandfather's house, determined to discover the truth. He had spent the night thinking about that photo and was sure there was something important his grandpa was hiding. "Good morning, Grandpa," he said, trying to sound casual. "Good morning, my boy. Come here. Your grandpa wants to apologize for what happened yesterday." Walter hugged his grandson affectionately, feeling the weight of guilt for having treated the boy harshly. "Grandpa, why did you get angry when I asked about the photo?" Walter sighed and sat down next to his grandson on the sofa. "Ethan, sometimes people hold on to memories that hurt a lot, and when those memories suddenly come back, we get confused. But Grandpa, who were those people in the picture?" Walter looked into his grandson's curious eyes and felt the urge to tell him everything, but fear was still greater than courage. They were people I knew a long time ago, before I married your grandmother Catherine." "And why did you say you didn't know them?" "Because it was a difficult time in my life and I'd rather not remember." Ethan sensed his grandfather was being more honest, but he still felt there was much more to be revealed. "Can I see the photo again?" he asked. Walter hesitated, but ultimately gave in. He went to the drawer, took out the photograph and handed it to his grandson with trembling hands. Ethan examined the image again, noticing details he hadn't seen before. The young man who was his grandfather was smiling, but there was a sadness in his eyes. The woman beside him seemed happy, lovingly holding the child. "Grandpa, this child in the picture looks a lot like you when you were young. Look at these photos of you on the wall," said Ethan, comparing the images. Walter felt his heart tighten. His grandson was right. Michael really had inherited his features. "Yeah, there is a resemblance," he admitted, trying to sound uninterested. "And that woman is very beautiful. Does she still live here in town?" I don't know, Ethan. It's been a long time since I've had contact with those people." At that moment, Jennifer arrived unexpectedly at her father's house. She had left work early to resolve that situation that was bothering Ethan. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, entering the living room. "Hi, Mom," greeted Ethan. "Look at the photo I found." Jennifer took the photograph from her son's hands and examined it carefully. When she saw the image, she was silent for a few seconds, processing what she was seeing. "Dad, this man in the photo is you," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. "Yeah, that's me," admitted Walter, tired of lying. "And who are these people with you?" Walter looked at his daughter and then at his grandson, feeling that the moment had come to at least reveal part of the truth. "She was a woman I dated before I met your mother," he said, choosing his words carefully. "And the child. That was her son." Jennifer noticed from the hesitation in her father's voice that there was more being hidden. "Dad, this photo is from 1978. You married Mom in 1983. Was this woman a serious relationship?" "It was, but it ended." "Why?" Walter stood up and walked to the window, avoiding the investigative gaze of his daughter and grandson. "Sometimes relationships just don't work out, Jennifer." "Dad, you're hiding something. I can see it in your eyes." Ethan watched the conversation in silence, realizing he had discovered something very important for the family. "Grandpa, did you love that woman?" asked the boy, with the innocence typical of childhood. The question hit Walter like a stab. He closed his eyes and felt the tears begin to well up. "I did, my boy. I loved her very much." "And why did you separate?" "Because Grandpa was a coward," said Walter, finally admitting the truth to himself. "Because I chose other people's opinions instead of fighting for love." Jennifer approached her father, sensing the pain in his voice. "Dad, what really happened?" Walter took a deep breath and finally decided to tell at least part of the truth. "I was dating Margaret Wilson. We were very young and very much in love, but my family didn't approve of the relationship. They said she wasn't from our social level, that I was wasting my time." And you broke up because of that? I did. And it was the biggest foolish thing I've done in my life. Ethan went back to examining the photo, now with a new perspective. Grandpa and this boy. Whose son was he? Walter felt he was getting close to revealing the most painful secret of his life. He looked at Ethan and saw in his grandson's eyes the same innocent curiosity that Michael must have had at 3 years old. He was Margaret's son, he said, technically not lying, but omitting the most important part. And his father? The father. The father didn't take responsibility. Jennifer noticed something in her father's expression that made her even more intrigued. Dad, how do you know that the father didn't take responsibility? Because Margaret told me. When did she tell you? Walter realized he was getting tangled in his own lies and decided to end the conversation. Look, this was a long time ago. It doesn't matter now. Grandpa, can I take the photo home to study it better? Asked Ethan. No, Walter replied quickly, taking the photograph from his grandson's hands. This photo stays here. The grandfather's exaggerated reaction confirmed for Jennifer that there was much more hidden in that story. Dad, I'll pick up Ethan tomorrow, and I hope that by then you'll be willing to tell the whole truth, she said, picking up her purse. Jennifer. Dad, I've known you for 45 years. I know when you're lying. After Jennifer and Ethan left, Walter was alone with his thoughts and the photograph that had changed his entire peaceful routine. He looked at the image again and murmured, Margaret, forgive me. Michael, forgive me. That night, he decided he needed to take action before his daughter and grandson discovered the truth through other means. He picked up the old phone book he kept on the bookshelf and looked for the name Margaret Wilson. To his surprise, he found the name listed at an address in the neighboring town, Dublin. His heart raced when he realized she was still alive and living near him. He held the phone in his hand for almost an hour, without the courage to dial. What would he say to a woman he had abandoned more than 40 years ago? How would he explain the cowardice he had committed? Finally, he put the phone book away and decided to postpone once again the conversation he knew was inevitable. The next day, Ethan arrived at his grandfather's house with a different determination. He had spent the whole night thinking about the photograph and had come up with a plan to discover more about that mysterious story. Good morning, Grandpa, he greeted, seeming more cheerful than in previous days. Good morning, Ethan. How are you today? I'm fine, Grandpa. I wanted to apologize for insisting on that photo subject. Walter was surprised by his grandson's maturity. You don't need to apologize, my boy. Grandpa was the one who was too harsh with you. Grandpa, can I go play outside while you rest? Of course you can, just don't go too far. Ethan left the house, but instead of playing in the yard, he went straight to the abandoned house of Mrs. Wilson, where he had found the book. His idea was to look for more clues about the story of the photo. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The old house had its doors open, awaiting the demolition scheduled for the following week. Ethan entered carefully, climbing the stairs that led to the attic where he had found the book. The place was dark and dusty, with rays of sunlight coming through the cracks in the roof. The boy used his mother's cell phone flashlight, which he had borrowed without permission, to light up the area. In the corner where the book was, he found an old shoebox full of letters and more photographs. His heart raced when he realized he had discovered a real treasure trove of information. He opened the first letter and read the heading, My dear Walter. It was a love letter, handwritten in a delicate feminine script. The date was September 1977. My dear Walter, I miss you every day. Michael asked about his daddy yesterday, and I didn't know what to say. When are you coming home? Ethan stopped reading, his heart pounding. Michael was the boy in the photo, and she was calling his grandfather the boy's daddy. This could only mean one thing. Michael was his grandfather's son. He continued examining the letters, finding several others with dates between 1977 and 1979. All signed by Margaret Wilson, and all talking about Michael as if he were Walter's son. In one of the photographs, he saw his grandfather young, playing with Michael in his arms, both smiling at the camera. In another, Margaret appeared pregnant, hugging Walter. "My God," murmured Ethan, finally understanding the truth. Grandpa has another son and never told anyone. At that moment he heard a voice behind him. "Boy, what are you doing here?" Ethan turned around, startled, and saw an elderly lady at the entrance to the attic. It was Mrs. Thompson, the neighbor of the abandoned house. I was just looking at these old things," said Ethan, trying to hide the letters. "Those things belonged to Margaret Wilson, who lived here in the 70s, said Mrs. Thompson, approaching. "She was a very pretty young woman, but she had a hard life. Did you know her?" "Yes, I did. I was her neighbor. She had a little boy, Michael. Poor thing. She raised the boy all alone after his father abandoned them both." Ethan felt a tightening in his heart upon hearing the confirmation of his suspicions. "And what happened to her?" "Oh, she moved away from here when Michael was still little. I think she went to Dublin to work at a school. The boy must be a man by now." "And Michael's father, did you know who he was?" Mrs. Thompson looked around and moved closer to Ethan, lowering her voice as if to tell a secret. "Yes, I do know. It was Walter Johnson, the one who lives up there on the street. But he never acknowledged the boy. His family didn't accept Margaret." Ethan was shocked to have his suspicions confirmed by a witness. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I am. I saw Walter leaving her house very early in the morning many times when Margaret was pregnant. Then he stopped coming and she was left alone with the child. And do they still live in Dublin?" "Margaret still does, as far as I know. Michael probably lives around there too." "Why are you interested in this story, son?" Ethan decided to be honest with the woman. "It's just that Walter Johnson is my grandfather, and I found these letters and pictures here." Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened, surprised by the revelation. "Good heavens! So you're Walter's grandson?" "My word!" "Yes, I am. And now I've discovered he has another son he never knew." "Oh, my boy, what a complicated situation. Your grandfather must be suffering a lot, keeping this secret." Ethan took the most important letters and pictures and put them in his backpack. "Mrs. Thompson, can you promise not to tell anyone I was here?" "Don't you worry, my boy. But are you going to talk to your grandfather about this?" "I am. He needs to know that I found out the truth." Ethan went back to his grandfather's house with a heavy heart and a mix of emotions. He was angry for having been deceived, sad to imagine the suffering of Margaret and Michael, but also determined to help his family reconcile. When he got home, he found Walter sleeping in the living room armchair. He looked at his grandfather's face, imagining the weight he had carried all these years. He decided to wait for his grandfather to wake up to have the most important conversation of their lives. Walter opened his eyes an hour later and found Ethan sitting on the sofa, staring intently at him. "Hi, son. How long was I asleep?" "About 2 hours, Grandpa." "You stayed here watching me all that time?" "I was thinking, Grandpa." "Thinking about what?" Ethan took a deep breath and decided to get straight to the point. "Grandpa, I know that Michael is your son." Walter felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. His hands began to tremble and he leaned on the armchair so he wouldn't fall. What did you say?" "I said I know that Michael is your son, that Margaret Wilson was your girlfriend, and that you abandoned them." "Ethan, how—" "I went back to the old house and found the letters she wrote to you. And Mrs. Thompson told me the whole story." Walter closed his eyes and felt that the moment he had tried to avoid for so long had finally come. "Ethan, Grandpa, why did you never tell me I have an uncle?" His grandson's innocent question made Walter break down in tears. For 47 years, he had carried the weight of that decision alone, and now a 10-year-old boy was asking the question he had never been able to answer for himself. "Because I was a coward, Ethan. Because I was afraid of what people would think and I abandoned my own family." "But Grandpa, there's still time to fix this." "No, my boy. It's been too long. Michael must hate me, and he has every right to." "Grandpa, how can you be sure if you never tried to talk to him?" Ethan took the letters he had brought from the abandoned house and placed them on the coffee table. I brought some of Margaret's letters. Would you like me to read one to you? Walter nodded, steeling himself to relive the pain he had tried to bury in the past. Ethan opened one of the letters and began to read. My dearest Walter, Michael took his first steps today. He held onto the kitchen table and walked to me smiling. I cried with emotion, but also with sadness, because you weren't here to see this special moment. I know your family is pressuring you, but we can't give up on our love because of others. Michael needs his father. Tears streamed down Walter's face as he listened to the words Margaret had written decades ago. Keep reading, he asked, his voice choked. Ethan opened another letter. Walter, I'm scared. Your mother came here today and said some very ugly things to me. She said I was a gold digger and that I was trying to trap you with a pregnancy. She offered me money to leave town and never look for you again. I told her I don't want her money. I just want you to acknowledge your son. Michael is not to blame for anything, he just wants his father's love. My mother did that, asked Walter, surprised and ashamed. It seems so, Grandpa. Do you want me to continue? Continue. Ethan picked up the last letter from the pile, which seemed to be the most important. Walter, this is the last letter I will write to you. I'm tired of waiting for you to make a decision. Michael is already 4 years old and still asks when Daddy is coming home. I don't know what to tell him anymore. We are moving to Dublin, where I got a job at a school. I won't beg for your love anymore, but know that Michael will always be your son, whether you like it or not. Maybe one day, when you become a real man, you'll have the courage to look for your boy, Margaret. The silence that followed was heavy and painful. Walter cried as he hadn't cried in decades, feeling the full weight of his wrong choices. Grandpa, Mrs. Thompson said that Margaret still lives in Dublin, said Ethan, trying to sound hopeful. And Michael, she thinks he probably lives around there too. Walter stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where he had spent all these years trying to forget his first family. Ethan, you don't understand how difficult it was back then. My father threatened to disown me if I didn't break up with Margaret. He said she was an uneducated woman who just wanted to take advantage of our family. But Grandpa, did you love her? I loved her more than life itself. And Michael? Michael was my joy. When he was born, I felt like the happiest man in the world. Then why did you abandon them? Walter sighed deeply before answering. Because I was young and insecure, because I believed my father would really take everything away, and I'd be left with no means to support Margaret and Michael. I thought that by marrying Catherine, I could secure a stable future and then, who knows, help Margaret in some way. And did you help? No. After I got married, I never had the courage to look for them again. Catherine got pregnant soon after with Jennifer, and I convinced myself it was better to leave the past behind. Grandpa, but you never stopped thinking about them. Never, Ethan. Every single day of my life I thought about Michael. I wondered how he was, if he was a good boy, if he was studying, if he was happy. And Margaret? Margaret was always the love of my life. I married Catherine, I was a good husband, but my heart always belonged to Margaret. Ethan looked at his grandfather with a mixture of understanding and determination. Grandpa, I think the time has come for you to fix this story. Ethan, it's been too long. Michael must be angry with me. Maybe, but you'll never know if you don't try. At that moment, Jennifer arrived, having left work early again. She entered the living room and found her father and son in a serious conversation. Good afternoon, she greeted. Is everything all right? Ethan looked at his grandfather, hoping he would tell his mother the truth. Jennifer, sit down here. I need to tell you something, said Walter, his voice serious. What happened, Dad? Do you remember that photo that Ethan found? I do. Well then, those people in the photo, they are my first family. Jennifer's eyes widened, not fully understanding what her father was saying. What do you mean, first family? The boy in the photo, Michael, is my son. Margaret Wilson is his mother. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying that you have a brother you never knew because I was too much of a coward to own up to it. The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer looked at her father, then at Ethan, trying to process this bombshell. Dad, are you saying you cheated on Mom? No, sweetheart. Michael was born 5 years before I met your mother. He is the result of a relationship I had in my youth that I abandoned under family pressure." "Good heavens," murmured Jennifer, bringing her hands to her face. "I have a brother?" "You do, and he probably doesn't even know you exist." Jennifer stood up and began pacing the room, trying to digest this revelation. "Dad, how did you manage to hide this for so long?" "It wasn't easy, Jennifer. I carried this guilt with me every single day." "And did Mom know?" "No, Catherine never knew about Michael." Ethan, who had remained silent during the conversation, decided to intervene. "Mom, I think we should try to find my uncle Michael." "Ethan, it's not that simple," said Jennifer, still in shock. "Why not?" "He's our family." "Because we don't know how he's going to react. He might not want to have any contact with us. But he has a right to know he has a sister and a nephew," insisted Ethan. Walter looked at his daughter and his grandson, seeing in both their eyes the curiosity and the desire to meet Michael. "Jennifer, Ethan is right. Michael has a right to know he has a family." "Dad, are you prepared to face his reaction? Because he might not want to forgive you." "I know that, sweetheart, but I can't die carrying this secret. Ethan discovered the truth, and now you know too. It's time to try to fix the mistake I made." Jennifer sat down again, still trying to take in everything she had just discovered. "Where do they live now?" "According to Mrs. Thompson in Dublin," replied Ethan. "And how are we going to find them?" Walter picked up the phone book where he had found Margaret's name the night before. "Margaret Wilson is still listed in the Dublin phone book," he said, showing the book to his daughter. "Have you tried calling?" "I didn't have the courage." Jennifer took the phone book and examined the address. "Dad, if you really want to do this, I can go with you there." "You would do that?" "I would. I want to meet my brother, too." Ethan jumped off the sofa, excited by the possibility of meeting his uncle. "And I want to go, too." "Ethan, it might be a difficult situation for a child," said Jennifer. "Mom, I'm the one who discovered all this. I have a right to be there." Walter looked at his grandson with pride and gratitude. "Jennifer, Ethan is right. He was the one who had the courage to discover the truth when I didn't even have the courage to admit it. He has to come with us." "All right. But first, let's try to contact them by phone." "No," said Walter firmly. "This conversation has to happen in person. Margaret deserves at least that after everything she's been through." The following afternoon, the three of them got ready for the trip to Dublin. Walter was nervous, but also relieved to have finally made the decision to face his past. During the hour-long car ride, Ethan asked many questions about Margaret and Michael, trying to imagine what it would be like to meet this part of the family he never knew existed. "Grandpa, what was Margaret like when you were dating her?" "She was the most beautiful and sweetest woman I had ever known. She had a smile that could light up any room she walked into." "And Michael?" "Michael was a very smart and affectionate child. He loved sitting on my lap listening to stories. Jennifer would listen to her father's stories in silence, imagining how difficult it must have been for him to leave that family." "Dad, did you ever officially register Michael as your son?" "No. When he was born, I was still torn between staying with Margaret or giving in to my family's pressure. I ended up not registering him. And then it was too late." "So, officially he's not your son?" "On paper, no. But by blood and in my heart he always was." When they arrived at the address found in the phone book, they saw a simple but well-kept house with a flower garden in front and a small sign on the door. "Margaret Wilson, private tutor." "This is it," said Walter, his voice trembling. "Dad, are you sure you want to do this?" "I am, Jennifer. I've waited too long already." The three got out of the car and walked to the front door. Walter took a deep breath before ringing the bell. A few seconds later, the door opened and a woman of about 70 appeared. Despite the grey hair and the wrinkles of time, you could still recognize the beauty Walter had described. When Margaret saw Walter standing at her door, her face turned pale and she leaned against the doorframe. "My God, Walter." "Hi, Margaret," he said, his voice choked up. Can we talk?" Margaret looked at Jennifer and Ethan, trying to understand who those people were. "This is my daughter Jennifer and my grandson Ethan," Walter explained. "Your daughter?" asked Margaret, still in shock. "Yes, Margaret, I need to talk to you and Michael about the past." Margaret remained silent for a few seconds, then opened the door completely. "Come in," she said in a low voice. The living room was simple but cozy, with graduation photos and a few plants scattered around. On the walls, there were several photographs of a man who looked to be about 50, clearly Michael as an adult. "Michael isn't home right now," said Margaret, offering water to the visitors. "He works at a mechanic's shop nearby." "Margaret, Walter began, but couldn't finish the sentence. "Walter, why did you come here after all this time?" she asked, with a mix of pain and curiosity in her voice. Ethan, noticing his grandfather was having trouble speaking, decided to step in. "Mrs. Wilson, I was the one who found the letters you wrote to my grandfather. He never told me I had an uncle." Margaret looked at the boy with tenderness. "And what's your name, child?" "Ethan. I'm 10 years old." "Ethan," repeated Margaret, smiling for the first time since they arrived. Michael always wanted to have nephews and nieces. Jennifer, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. "Mrs. Wilson, I only found out about my brother's existence yesterday. I came here because I would really like to meet him." "Your brother?" asked Margaret, surprised. "Michael is my half-brother, isn't he?" Margaret nodded, still processing the fact that Walter had finally told the truth to his family. "Michael always knew he had a father, but he never knew he had a sister," said Margaret. "Mrs. Wilson," said Ethan, with the curiosity typical of his age, "were you mad at my grandfather for leaving?" Margaret smiled sadly before answering, "Ethan, I was very sad. But with time I learned to forgive. Anger isn't good for the heart." "And Michael? Was he mad?" Michael grew up with many questions about his father. When he became an adult, he went through a phase of being very angry. But now at 50, he's more mature. Walter finally found his voice. "Margaret, I came here to ask for forgiveness. I know I can't undo the wrong I did, but I need you both to know that not a single day of my life has gone by without me thinking of the two of you." "Walter, why did you abandon us?" asked Margaret with tears in her eyes. "Because I was a coward. Because I believed my parents would take everything away from me and I wouldn't be able to support you. But we didn't need money, Walter. We needed you." "I know that now, Margaret, but at the time I was very young and insecure." Jennifer noticed the pain in both their eyes and decided to intervene. "Mrs. Wilson, I know my father made a terrible mistake, but he carried that guilt his entire life. And now we would like to try to fix what can be fixed." "Jennifer, is that your name?" "That's right. Jennifer, you have to understand that Michael suffered greatly from his father's absence. He grew up wondering why his father didn't want him." Ethan approached Margaret and took her hand. "Mrs. Wilson, my grandfather really wants to meet my uncle Michael. May I call him at the shop?" "Ethan, perhaps it's better to wait for him to get home from work. This conversation could be a shock for him." "What time does he arrive?" asked Walter. "About 6 o'clock. "We can wait if it's not an inconvenience," said Jennifer. Margaret looked at the three visitors and saw the sincerity in their eyes. "You can stay. I'll make some coffee for you." While Margaret prepared the coffee in the kitchen, Ethan took the opportunity to examine the photos of Michael on the walls. The resemblance he had to Walter was striking. "Grandpa, look how much my uncle looks like you," exclaimed Ethan. Walter approached the photographs and felt his heart tighten, seeing the son he had abandoned, now grown and formed. "He became a handsome man," he said, with a mix of pride and sadness. Jennifer was also looking at the photos, trying to imagine what it would have been like to grow up knowing that brother. "Dad, does he have any children?" she asked. "I don't know, dear. I know nothing about his life." Margaret returned from the kitchen with a tray of coffee and cookies. "Michael was married twice, but he had no children," she said, indirectly answering Jennifer's question. "He always said he was afraid of being a bad father because he never had an example." The phrase hit Walter like a stab to the heart. "That's my fault," he murmured. "Walter, there's no use blaming yourself now. What's past is past. The important thing is what we do from here on out." Ethan, ever the optimist, decided to lighten the mood. "Mrs. Wilson, when my uncle arrives, can I tell him about how I discovered the letters? Yes, you can, Ethan. I'm sure he will be happy to meet you. And will he be happy to meet Mommy too? I think so. Michael always wanted to have siblings. For the next 2 hours, Margaret told them about the life she had built with Michael, how she had worked hard to support her son, how she had become a teacher, and how Michael had grown up to be a responsible and hard-working man. He's been a mechanic since he was 20, Margaret said with pride. He has a small shop, but he's very honest and capable. And he never wanted to look for his father? Asked Jennifer. He did. When he turned 18, he came to Columbus a few times, but he never had the courage to approach your house. He knew where Walter lived, asked Jennifer, surprised. He did. Once he stood on the corner by your house for 2 hours, trying to work up the courage to ring the bell. Why didn't he ring it? Because he saw Walter playing in the garden with a little girl, said Margaret, looking at Jennifer. That little girl was you. Michael realized his father had a new family and thought there was no place for him in it. Jennifer felt her eyes fill with tears, imagining her brother alone on the street, watching a family that didn't know he existed. Mrs. Wilson, why did you never insist? Why did you never officially look for my father? Jennifer, your grandmother was very clear when she said she didn't want us around. And I didn't have the financial means to fight it in court. So I decided to accept the situation and raise Michael on my own. At 6 o'clock sharp, they heard the sound of a motorcycle stopping in front of the house. Margaret stood up, visibly nervous. It's Michael, she said. I'll talk to him first before I introduce you. All right, agreed Walter. Margaret went out to meet her son in the garden. The 3 visitors could hear voices from outside, but couldn't make out what was being said. After a few minutes, the front door opened, and Margaret came in, followed by a tall, dark-skinned man with graying hair at his temples. The resemblance to Walter was striking. When Michael saw his father sitting in his mother's living room, his eyes filled with tears and anger at the same time. So it's you, he said, his voice trembling. After 50 years, you decided to show up. Walter stood up, his legs shaky, and faced the son he had abandoned. Michael, You what? Michael interrupted angrily. What did you come here for? To make yourself feel better? Son, I came to ask for forgiveness. Don't call me son, Michael exploded. Sons have fathers who are present. I had to be a man when I was 10 years old. The atmosphere grew heavy with the tension between father and son. Ethan watched everything in silence, feeling a mixture of fear and curiosity. Michael, said Jennifer, standing up, I'm your sister Jennifer, and this is my son Ethan, your nephew. Michael looked at Jennifer and Ethan, his expression softening slightly. So you're my sister, he said, his voice calmer. Mom told me he had other children. Michael, I only found out you existed yesterday. If I had known sooner, I would have looked for you. And the boy? He's my son, Ethan, your nephew. Ethan timidly approached Michael. Uncle Michael? He said, in a small voice. Michael bent down to the boy's height and smiled for the first time since he had arrived. Hi, Ethan. You're my nephew? Yes, I am. And I'm the one who found out you existed. How so? Ethan quickly told him about the book he found, the photograph and the letters. Michael listened attentively, impressed by his nephew's cleverness. You did all that to find us? Yes, Uncle, because family should stick together. Michael felt his eyes fill with tears again, but this time with emotion. You're right, Ethan. Family should stick together. Then Michael looked back at Walter, who had remained standing, waiting for an opportunity to speak. And you, he said, pointing at his father, what do you have to say after 50 years of abandonment? Walter took a deep breath and finally found the words he had held on to for decades. Michael, I know I can't undo the harm I've done. I know you grew up without a father, that you went through hard times, that you had to be strong when you were still a child. I know you must hate me, and you have every right to. Go on, said Michael, his arms crossed. But I want you to know that not a single day of my life has passed without me thinking about you and your mother. Every day I regretted the cowardly decision I made. Every day I wanted to take it back, but I didn't have the courage. And why didn't you have the courage? Because I was young and insecure, because I believed my parents would take everything away from me if I didn't obey them, and because after I made the wrong choice, I was too ashamed to admit my mistake. Michael remained silent for a few minutes, processing his father's words. You know I came to your house a few times, he said finally. Your mother told me today. I would stand on the corner watching you play with her, he said, looking at Jennifer. And I thought, he has a new family now. He doesn't need me anymore. Michael, I always needed you, said Walter with tears in his eyes. I always missed you. Then why did you never look for me? Because I thought you'd be happier without me, that I would only bring problems to your life. Michael walked to the window and stood looking at the street, trying to organize his thoughts. Do you know what the hardest thing in my life was? He asked, without turning around. What? It was when I was 15 and the boys at school started making fun of me because I didn't have a father. I would come home crying, and Mum would try to explain to me that some men just aren't cut out to be fathers. Walter felt his heart break upon hearing his son's account. Mum always defended you, Michael continued. She never spoke badly about you in front of me. She always said that maybe one day you'd come back. Margaret was always a special woman, said Walter, looking at his former girlfriend with affection. Yeah, and because of her I managed to become a decent man, even without a father to teach me how to be one. Ethan, who had stayed quiet observing the conversation between father and son, decided to intervene. Uncle Michael, Grandpa Walter is a very good man. He teaches me lots of cool things and always takes care of me with lots of affection. Michael looked at his nephew and smiled. Is that right, Ethan? Yes, it is. He messes up sometimes like everybody, but he has a very good heart. And do you think I should forgive him? I think so, Uncle, because everybody deserves a second chance. Ethan's innocent words touched everyone present. Michael looked back at his father, and for the first time in 50 years, he saw not the man who had abandoned him, but an elderly man full of regret and vulnerable. Dad, he finally said, using the word he had held back for so long. Yes, my son. I can't pretend I'm not angry. It was 50 years of being left behind. But I also can't pretend I didn't miss you every single day. Michael, let me speak, Dad. I need to say this. Walter nodded, waiting for his son's words. I wanted to hate you for many years. I cursed your name more than once. I promised myself that if you ever showed up, I'd throw you out of here. And why aren't you doing that? Because I can see in your eyes that you suffered as much as I did. And because, he said, looking at Jennifer and Ethan, I always wanted to have a big family. Jennifer was moved hearing her brother's words. Michael, I always wanted to have an older brother too. Older? Asked Michael, smiling for the first time. Weren't you born before me? I was, in 1975. Then you're 5 years older than me. I always wanted an older brother to look out for me. Michael walked over to Jennifer and hugged her. Now you do, he said. Ethan, seeing his uncle and mother hugging, ran to join the embrace. Now we're a real family, the boy exclaimed. Walter watched the scene with his heart overflowing with emotion. Margaret approached him and touched his arm. You did the right thing by coming here, she said. Margaret, do you forgive me? Walter, I forgave you a long time ago. Holding a grudge only hurts the person holding it. And you, do you still... Margaret smiled and finished the question he couldn't ask. If I still love you? Walter, a part of me will always love you. You were my first love, the father of my son. That will never change. But we're different people now. 50 years changes a lot of things. I understand. But we can be friends. We can be a family, even if it's not in the way we dreamed when we were young. Michael separated from the hug with Jennifer and Ethan and approached his father. Dad, I can't pretend it's going to be easy. 50 years of hurt don't disappear in an afternoon. I know, son. But I'm willing to try. For me, for you, and especially for them, he said, pointing to Jennifer and Ethan. Michael, you don't know how happy that makes me. But I have a few conditions. What conditions? First, I want to know everything about your life. I want to meet my sister and my nephew. I want to know what kind of grandfather you are. I agree. Second, I want you to tell me about my paternal grandmother, my uncles, my family that I never knew. I agree to that too. And third, I want you to be honest with me from now on. No more lies or half-truths. I promise, Michael. Father and son looked at each other for a few seconds, 50 years of distance shrinking with each second. Then let's try, said Michael, extending his hand to his father. Walter didn't take the outstretched hand. Instead, he hugged his son with all the strength he had in his body. 50 years of longing poured into that hug. Michael, after an initial resistance, returned the hug, allowing himself to finally feel the paternal affection he had wanted all his life. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Margaret watched the scene with tears in her eyes, finally seeing the reconciliation she had dreamed of for decades. Ethan was clapping with joy, happy to have managed to bring his family together. "Now we're talking," exclaimed the boy. "Now we are a complete family." "Ethan," said Michael, separating from the hug with his father, "thank you for not giving up on finding us." "You're welcome, Uncle Michael. Family is family, right?" "Yes, my nephew. Family is family." Jennifer approached her father and brother. "Dad, thank you for having the courage to come here. Daughter, if it weren't for Ethan, I would probably have died without having done this." "And Michael," said Jennifer, turning to her brother, "thank you for giving our father a chance. Jennifer, you gave me something I never had, a sister. How could I not give him a chance?" Margaret approached the reunited family group. "Everyone, how about we have dinner together? It's been a long time since this house has hosted a whole family." "That's a great idea," agreed Walter. "Michael, will you have dinner with your father?" "I will, Dad. We have 50 years of conversation to catch up on." During dinner, the stories flowed naturally. Michael talked about his difficult youth, but also about his achievements. He had become a respected mechanic in the city, had his own shop, and had helped many underprivileged young people learn a trade. "Uncle Michael," said Ethan, "you teach poor boys how to fix cars?" "Yes, I do, Ethan. I think everyone deserves a chance to have a decent trade." "That's so cool. You must be a really cool uncle." "I'll try to be the best uncle in the world for you, Ethan." Walter listened to his son's stories with a mix of pride and regret. Michael had become an honest and generous man, despite having grown up without a father figure. "Michael, you became a much better man than I was," said Walter. "Dad, don't say that. You are a good man too. Just see how much Ethan loves you." "It's true," agreed Ethan. "Grandpa Walter is the best grandpa in the world, and now I have the best uncle in the world too." Margaret watched the interaction between the three generations with satisfaction. After so many years of pain, she finally saw her family reunited. "Walter," she said, "Michael inherited many things from you. The generosity, the intelligence, the skill with his hands. And he inherited your kindness, Margaret, your strength and your ability to forgive." After dinner, they sat in the living room to continue talking. Michael brought out some photo albums to show his life to his father and sister. "Here I am graduating from the technical mechanics course," he said, showing a photo from 1993. "Mom was so proud that day." "I certainly was," confirmed Margaret. "I worked 3 jobs to pay for his course." "Margaret, why did you never look for me to ask for help?" asked Walter. "Because you had made it clear you didn't want any more contact with us, and I was too proud to beg. If I had known about the difficulties you went through—" "Dad," Michael interrupted, "there's no use thinking about what could have been. What matters is that we're together now." "Michael is right, Dad," agreed Jennifer. "The past can't be changed, but the future can still be built." Ethan, who had been admiring Michael's photos, had an idea. "Uncle Michael, can you teach me how to work on cars?" "Of course, Ethan. Would you like to learn?" "I'd love to. And can you come over for dinner at our house too?" Michael looked at Walter and Jennifer. "Yes, I can come, Ethan, if you'll have me." "Of course we'll have you," Jennifer said quickly. "You're my brother. Our home is your home." "And Mommy," asked Ethan, "can I call Mrs. Margaret Grandma?" Margaret was touched by the boy's question. "Yes, you can, my grandson. I would love to be your grandma." "So now I have 2 grandpas and 1 grandma," exclaimed Ethan happily. "2 grandpas?" asked Michael, confused. "It's just that Mommy's father is still alive," explained Ethan. "Grandpa George. Now I have Grandpa Walter and Grandpa George and Grandma Margaret." "And don't forget about me," joked Michael. "Now you also have an uncle." "The best uncle in the world," said Ethan, hugging Michael. As the evening went on, the family bonds grew stronger. Michael gradually lost his initial stiffness and began to call Walter Dad naturally. Jennifer found in her older brother the protection she had always wanted. Ethan gained an uncle who promised to teach him many cool things. "Everyone," said Margaret when it was past 10 o'clock, "how about we plan a lunch for next Sunday? We can make a feijoada to celebrate our family reunion." "That's a great idea," said Jennifer. "I can bring dessert." "And I can help cook," offered Walter. "Dad," said Michael, smiling, "you know how to cook." "I learned after I became a widower. I'm no chef, but I get by." "That's good. Then we'll cook together." "Michael, you cook?" asked Jennifer, surprised. "Yes, I do. Mom taught me since I was little. When you live alone with your mother, you learn to help with everything." Ethan yawned, showing signs of tiredness after the emotionally intense afternoon. "I think it's time for us to head back," said Jennifer. "Ethan needs to go to bed early." "But I don't want to leave," protested Ethan. "I want to stay here talking with my uncle and my grandma." "Ethan, we'll see each other on Sunday," said Michael, "and whenever you want you can come here to visit me." "Really? Really? Now you have a family in Dublin too." "And you can come to Columbus whenever you want," said Walter. "Our home is always open to you." Margaret hugged Walter goodbye. "Walter, thank you for having the courage to come here. Margaret, thank you for forgiving me and for raising our son so well." "Our son, I liked hearing that," she said, smiling. Michael hugged his father for a long time. "Dad, I'll see you on Sunday." "See you, my son, I love you." "I love you too, Dad." Jennifer hugged her brother. "Michael, I'm so happy to have found you." "Me too, little sister. Now you have an older brother to protect you, like you always wanted." Ethan was the last to say goodbye, hugging Margaret first. "Grandma Margaret, you are the coolest grandma in the world, and you are the most special grandson, Ethan." Then he hugged Michael. "Uncle Michael, thank you for forgiving Grandpa. Thank you, Ethan, for finding us." On the way back to Columbus, the car was silent, each person processing the emotions of the afternoon. It was Ethan who broke the silence. "Grandpa, are you happy?" "I'm very happy, Ethan. Happier than I've been in the last 50 years. "And Mommy, did you like Uncle Michael?" "I loved him, son. He's exactly how I imagined my older brother would be." "Grandpa," Ethan continued, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, my boy." "Do you regret marrying Grandma Catherine?" The question caught Walter by surprise. He thought carefully before answering. "Ethan, I don't regret marrying your grandmother. She was a wonderful woman, and without her, I wouldn't have your mother, and your mother wouldn't have you, but I do regret abandoning Margaret and Michael." "I see. So you did one right thing and one wrong thing at the same time." "That's right, Ethan. Life is sometimes complicated like that. But everything's all right now, right, Grandpa? Everything's all right now, my grandson." When they got home, Jennifer helped Ethan take a bath and brush his teeth. At bedtime, the boy asked a question she wasn't expecting. "Mom, do you think Grandma Catherine would be mad if she knew about Uncle Michael?" Jennifer thought of her mother, an understanding and kind woman who had loved Walter deeply. "No, son. Your grandmother was a very good woman. She would be happy to know your grandfather found peace. And would she like Uncle Michael? I'm sure she would. Michael is a good man, just like your grandfather." "Mom, can I tell this story at school?" "Yes, you can. It's a beautiful story about forgiveness and family. It really is. It's the best story I've ever lived." The following Sunday, Margaret's house was full of people and joy. Michael had arrived early to help prepare the feijoada. Walter brought the dessert promised by Jennifer and a bottle of wine to toast the family reunion. Ethan couldn't keep still, running back and forth, excited about the family lunch. "Uncle Michael, when are we starting the mechanics lessons?" the boy asked. How about next week? You can come here after school and I'll teach you some basics. Really? Of course. But only if your mother says it's okay. I'm okay with it, said Jennifer. It will be good for Ethan to learn practical things. During lunch, Michael made an important announcement. Everyone, I have something to tell you. What is it? Asked Walter, curious. I was thinking about moving to Columbus. Really? Exclaimed Ethan, excited. Really? There's nothing left for me here in Dublin. My shop is doing well, but I can open a branch in Columbus. Michael, said Jennifer, that would be wonderful. We'd finally have the whole family together. And you, Dad? Asked Michael, looking at Walter. What do you think? I think it would be the fulfillment of an old dream, son. And Mom? Asked Michael, turning to Margaret. Would you come with me? Margaret was surprised by the question. Michael, I have my life here, my students. Mom, you could teach private lessons in Columbus too, and that way you'd be close to your grandchildren, said Michael, winking at Ethan. Grandchildren? Asked Margaret. Ethan is my only grandchild. For now, said Michael, smiling mysteriously. Who knows, maybe a few more little grandchildren will show up. Uncle Michael, said Ethan, excited. Are you going to have kids? I don't know, Ethan. But now that I have a real family, who knows, maybe I'll feel inspired to start my own family too. It would be cool to have a cousin, said Ethan. Easy, Ethan, laughed Jennifer. Let's let your uncle move first, then we can think about cousins. Michael, said Walter, if you move to Columbus, we can work together at the shop. Dad, do you know anything about mechanics? I do. In my youth, before taking over the family business, I worked for a few years in a shop. I didn't know that. Why did you never tell me? Son, we have 50 years of life to catch up on. There are still many things you don't know about me. Then it's decided, said Michael. I'll start arranging the move. And I'll go with you, said Margaret, surprising everyone. After all, I have a grandson to look after now. Ethan jumped from his chair and hugged Margaret. Grandma Margaret is going to live near me, he celebrated. I am my grandson, and I'm going to teach you how to make cookies, just like your other grandma used to. That's so cool. Now I'll have 2 grandmas making cookies for me. Ethan, said Walter, smiling, you're going to get very spoiled with so many people loving you. It's okay, Grandpa. I can share the love with everyone. After lunch, they went out for a walk around the central square of Dublin. Ethan ran ahead, playing a game of catching leaves falling from the trees. Michael and Jennifer were talking about the move, making plans for the future. Walter walked beside Margaret, reliving memories from when they were young. Margaret, said Walter, thank you for raising Michael so well. He became a better man than I am. Walter, stop putting yourself down. Michael inherited many of your qualities. What qualities? I abandoned him when he needed me the most. But you had the courage to come here and ask for forgiveness. That shows the man you really are. It was Ethan who gave me that courage. That boy is special. He is. He inherited the family's kindness. Margaret, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. You never got married. Margaret smiled before answering. I did get married, Walter, to a very good teacher, 5 years after you left. And what happened? He passed away 10 years ago. He was a wonderful man. He made me very happy. I'm happy to hear that. You deserved to be happy. And you, Walter, were you happy with Catherine? I was, Margaret. Catherine was a wonderful woman. But I always kept a piece of my heart saved for you and Michael. And now I feel complete for the first time in 50 years. At that moment, Ethan came running toward them. Grandpa! Grandma Margaret! He shouted. Uncle Michael said he's going to teach me how to play soccer too. That's great, Ethan, said Walter. You're going to learn many things from your uncle. And are you two going to be friends again? Asked Ethan, looking at Walter and Margaret. We are, my grandson, said Margaret, smiling at Walter. We're a family now. That's great, celebrated Ethan. Now just one thing is missing. What's missing? Asked Walter. Uncle Michael needs to get a girlfriend to marry and give me a cousin. The adults laughed at the boy's innocence. Ethan, said Margaret, those things can't be forced. They happen naturally. But I can root for it, right, Grandma? You can, my grandson. You can root for it. In the months that followed, Michael and Margaret's move to Columbus happened gradually. Michael managed to sell his workshop in Dublin and open a new one in Columbus, with Walter's financial help. "Dad," Michael said on the day the new workshop opened, "thank you for the help." "Son, 50 years of back child support," Walter joked. "I still owe you a lot." "Dad, you don't owe me anything. Just your presence is worth everything." The Johnson & Son workshop quickly became known in town for its honesty and quality of work. Walter, even though retired, enjoyed spending his afternoons there, helping Michael and teaching the trade to Ethan. Margaret got several private students and settled into a small but cozy house, 2 blocks from Walter's home. Ethan would visit her every day after school, and she did indeed teach the boy how to make the famous cookies. "Grandma Margaret," Ethan said one Saturday afternoon, "can I invite some friends from school to eat your cookies?" "Of course, my grandson. How many friends?" "About 5. "Then let's make cookies for everyone." Jennifer watched the transformation that had happened in the family with joy and gratitude. Her father was happier and more active than he had been since Catherine's death. Ethan was learning many new things from his uncle and his new grandmother, and she had gained a protective brother who had become her best friend. "Michael," she said one afternoon, while they watched Ethan trying to change the oil of a car in the shop, "thank you. Thank you for what?" "For forgiving our father, for accepting us into your life, for being the brother I always wanted to have." "Jennifer, thank you too, and especially Ethan. If it weren't for his curiosity, maybe we would never have met." "That's true, that boy is a gift in our lives." "He is. And you know what else?" "What?" "He's still going to give us a lot of joy. I'm sure he's going to be a special man." Ethan, who was focused on his task, didn't hear the adults' conversation. But if he had known, he would have been proud to know he had been responsible for reuniting a family that had been separated for 5 decades. 6 months after the family reunion, Michael met Melissa, a physical education teacher, who brought her car to the shop for a repair. What should have been a routine service turned into long conversations, coffees after work, and eventually a serious relationship. "Uncle Michael," said Ethan when he met Melissa, "she's very pretty. Are you going to get married?" "Ethan," scolded Jennifer, "you don't ask that kind of question." "It's okay," laughed Michael. "Who knows, Ethan? If she'll have me—" "Of course I will," said Melissa, smiling, "especially because now I know you have a wonderful family." "And do you want to have children?" asked Ethan, direct as always. "Ethan," said Jennifer again. "I do, Ethan," replied Melissa. "I'd love to have a son to play with you." Ethan clapped his hands with joy. "I'm finally going to have a cousin." 1 year later, Michael and Melissa were married in a simple but moving ceremony. Walter walked his son to the altar, fulfilling the dream he had held for 50 years. "Thank you, Dad," murmured Michael before the ceremony, "for being here with me on the most important day of my life. Thank you, son, for giving me this opportunity." Ethan was the ring-bearer at the wedding, carrying the rings with the seriousness of an adult. Margaret cried with emotion seeing her son get married. Jennifer was the maid of honor, representing the family Michael had gained. In the wedding speech, Michael made sure to thank everyone. "Melissa, thank you for accepting not just me, but my whole crazy family," he began, drawing laughter from the guests. "Dad, thank you for having the courage to come back into my life. Jennifer, thank you for being the sister I always wanted to have. Margaret, my mother, thank you for never giving up on me. And Ethan," he said, looking at his nephew, "thank you for being the detective who discovered our lost family." Ethan waved from the table, proud of his role in the family reunion. "And now," Michael continued, "I hope our family continues to grow and get stronger every day." During the party, Walter danced a slow waltz with Margaret, reliving their youth. "Margaret, you still dance very well," he said. "And you're still a good dance partner," she replied. "Do you think we did the right thing?" asked Walter. "What?" "Forgiving and forgetting the past." "Walter, forgiving was the best thing we did. Just look," she said, pointing to Michael and Melissa dancing, to Jennifer talking with the guests, and to Ethan playing with other children. Look at this beautiful family we've built. It's true, I never imagined I could be so happy at 73, and I never imagined I'd see my son getting married with his grandfather by his side. Margaret, can I confess something? Of course. I still love you to this day. Margaret smiled tenderly. Walter, I love you too, but it's a different love now. It's the love of two people who share a beautiful history and a wonderful family. I understand, and I am content with that love. It's the best kind of love we can have at our age, the serene love of maturity. 2 years after Michael's wedding, Melissa gave birth to little Walter Jr., affectionately nicknamed Little Walt. Ethan, now 13 years old, was overjoyed at his cousin's arrival. Grandpa, said Ethan, holding the baby in his arms, he looks just like you when you were a baby. How do you know what I looked like as a baby? Asked Walter, laughing. Because I saw the photos Grandma Margaret showed me. Little Walt has the same eyes as you. It's true, agreed Michael, looking at his son. He inherited the Johnson family eyes. Margaret, now officially a great-grandmother, was beside herself with happiness. I never imagined that at 75 I would meet my great-grandson, she said with tears of joy. And I never imagined I'd be a great-grandfather, said Walter. Life really holds surprises for us. Jennifer, at 50, had become a doting aunt to both Ethan and little Walt. Michael, she said, watching her brother change his son's diaper, you are a wonderful father. I'm trying to be the father I always wanted to have, replied Michael. And you're succeeding. Little Walt is very lucky to have you as a father, and to have his grandfather present from day one, added Michael, looking fondly at Walter. Ethan, who had witnessed his family's transformation over the years, reflected on everything that had happened since the day he found that dusty book in the attic of the abandoned house. Grandpa, he said one afternoon when they were alone in the workshop, do you remember when I found that photo? How could I forget? That day changed our lives forever. Were you afraid to tell me the truth? I was very afraid, Ethan. I was afraid you would be disappointed in me. But why? You were just sorry for a mistake you made when you were young. Yeah, but when you've been carrying a guilt for so long, you think everyone will judge you. Grandpa, can I tell you something? Of course, my grandson. I think you were brave. It took time, but you had the courage to fix the mistake. Ethan, the brave one was you. You were the one who insisted on discovering the truth and didn't give up until you brought our family together. I just did what I thought was right, Grandpa. And that's exactly what changed our lives. You did what you thought was right. That evening, during the family dinner, Walter, Jennifer, Ethan, Michael, Melissa, Margaret, and little Walt, Ethan asked a question he had been saving for a long time. Everyone, can I tell our story to everybody? What do you mean? Asked Jennifer. Can I write our story and publish it? I think it could help other families who are separated by misunderstandings. That's a great idea, said Michael. Our story might inspire other people to forgive and reconcile. But what will you write about? Asked Walter. I'll write about a boy who found an old book in the attic of an abandoned house and discovered that his grandfather had a secret family. I'll tell how that discovery brought together a family that had been separated for 50 years. Ethan, said Margaret, moved, do you really want to do this? Yes, I do, Grandma Margaret. I want everyone to know that it's never too late to ask for forgiveness, and that it's always worth fighting for your family. Then you have our permission, said Walter. Tell our story, Ethan. Tell the world that love always wins in the end. Ethan smiled, already imagining how he would start his book. Once upon a time there was a curious boy who couldn't understand why his grandfather got so nervous when he saw an old photograph. And so, 5 years after finding that mysterious photo, Ethan had not only reunited his family, but had also found his calling, to tell stories that inspire people to never give up on love and forgiveness. Little Walt, now 2 years old, was playing on the living room floor with a picture book, oblivious to the adults' conversation, but already part of the beautiful story of a family that learned it's never too late to start over. The table was full, the hearts were full, and the Johnson family was finally complete. The dusty book that Ethan had found in that attic had become the first chapter of the most beautiful story of love and forgiveness he knew, the story of his own family. End of story. Now tell us, do you believe Ethan did the right thing by insisting on discovering the truth about the photo? What would you have done in Walter's place? Leave your opinion in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.